Okay, our lesson today is 83361, Climate and Natural Resources. And your I can statement for this is I can identify the climates and natural resources found in the United States and Canada and describe the impact on where people live and what they do. So let's talk about climate zones first. The United States and Canada, this is the only region in the world that we are going to study where you can find all of the climate zones. So let's take a look at the climate map here. We can see listed here all of the climate zones, and then we see the map here. So let's take a look. The first one was tropical wet and tropical wet dry. The United States includes states like Hawaii and territories like Puerto Rico and Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so those places would have a tropical wet or a tropical wet and dry climate. And they're not on this map, but you know where Hawaii is, so we'll figure it out. The next one here is steppe. Steppe is a dry climate. It's in your yellow cheat sheets that you can use on your test. And steppe climate is around here near the mountains. The next climate is desert, and we'd see that in the American West in the desert. So Nevada, Arizona, parts of California, New Mexico. We also see Mediterranean. This climate can be found in California, and it's called the Mediterranean because most of the places in the world that have this climate are near the Mediterranean Sea. Our next one is the humid subtropical, which is in the American South and East, where it's very warm during the summer. Their winters are mild, and they get lots of rainfall. We have marine west coast, which can be found in Oregon and Washington. And again, it's a very mild climate. It doesn't get very hot, but it doesn't get very cold, and it rains a lot. We have humid continental, which you can find in a lot of the United States, including Minnesota, and also southern Canada, where you have really hot summers and really cold winters. And we get plenty of rainfall and snowfall. We have subarctic, which makes up most of Canada and Alaska. And again, it's a colder climate. One of the coldest climates is tundra, which you see in northern Canada and Alaska, where you have permafrost, so the ground is permanently frozen. We also have ice cap or ice sheet, which is near the poles. And our last climate here is highlands, which you can find in the Rocky Mountains. So how does climate impact where people live and what they do? People tend to live in more moderate climates. So if you look at our population density map here, you can see where a lot of people live is the humid subtropical and humid continental climates. And then on the west coast, we see the marine west coast climate and the Mediterranean climate here. 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border. So if you look at all of the highly populated cities and places in Canada, they're all here near the U.S. border. So let's look at natural resources. In your pre-assessment, I asked you to list 6 natural resources and the regions they came from. And so let's take a look at this mineral map here. You can see that oil can be found near the Gulf Coast and in Texas. We can see that forestry, or when you cut down trees to make paper and other lumber products, can be found in the Pacific Northwest. Natural gas can also be found. These are these little fire things here. Also Texas and the Gulf Coast. With mining, in Minnesota and Canada, you see iron mining here. You see lots of coal mining in the Appalachian Mountains here, and uranium in southern Canada, in eastern Canada. And then you also see along the coast that there's fishing industries here. So now let's look at agriculture. For those of you that don't remember, agriculture is just a fancy word for farming. And the 3 areas of farming we're going to look here is the dairy belt, which is here. We have lots of cows that provide dairy. We have the wheat belt, and here there's actually the spring wheat belt and the winter wheat belt. Because of climates, it's warmer here than it is here. And then we also have the Corn Belt that's here. It goes through Iowa and Illinois, where most of the country's corn is produced. We have the Old Cotton Belt. Again, we don't have a lot of cotton being farmed here anymore. And then in the west, we have grazing with animals, so that's where you see the ranchers and that kind of stuff. So let's talk about how natural resources impact where people live and what they do. Cities near natural resources can become manufacturing and trade centers. So if you look, we have a population density map here and our mineral map here. You can see that our highly populated areas here coincide with where traditionally we have lots of mining, because those are the cities that were created because they had jobs available for people. And we know that population density tends to be lower in agricultural regions because a lot of land is necessary for farming. So in the Midwest here, you can see here it's not as many people here. Farmers need a lot of land to farm, and so that means not a lot of people can live there. And that is our lesson for today. Go ahead and write your summary to the question. Your I can state will go all the way back to your question is, I can identify the climates and natural resources found in the United States and Canada and describe the impact on where people live and what they do.